I think my wife is possessed by the devil. Those are words that I don't think a person thinks that they'll ever hear in their whole entire lifetime. At least not by somebody who doesn't mean it in the non-literal sense. I'd noticed for the last couple of months that my friend Neil had been coming to work looking a little off. Some days he would stroll in looking as if he had absolutely no idea where he was. His clothes were unkempt and his hair was in a complete disarrayed mess. Shirt and slacks wrinkled and sometimes soiled. Everyone in the office was afraid to ask if he was alright because clearly he wasn't. Neil was an overachiever. He was a top performer in the office, someone that people might label as an example of what an employee should be. So, when he started to come to work looking a mess, you better believe that it was noticed. At first it was subtle, no shirt tucked in. His hair was just a little messy. Sometimes his socks wouldn't match. We just figured that maybe he was running late. But soon after that it was mismatched shoes and shirts on inside out. The rumors around the office was that he was having an affair. The others were about marital troubles with his wife, which, of course, were from the affair that he was allegedly having. You know how office rumors fly like a tornado, which is another reason why no one had the nerve to ask him if he was in fact alright. One afternoon, after a particularly hectic day, I found myself in my cube after everyone had gone home. I had some work to catch up on and had to meet a strict deadline. After my work was completed, I stood up to gather my purse and other belongings when I saw a head poke up from behind a cubicle wall. Scared the daylights out of me, but I soon realized that it was in fact Neil. I walked over and casually asked him what he was doing staying so late in the office. It was well after 10 and I knew the reason why I was there, but not him. I stared at the back of his head for a long time, waiting for some sort of reply. The longer the silence got, the awkwardness of the situation began to grow. Uncomfortable and not knowing what else to say, I turned to leave him when, from his direction, I heard a low sob. I turned back in his direction to see him staring right into my eyes. His face was red and puffy, full of tears. He had this look on his face. It was a look of hopelessness mixed with terror. I immediately dropped my belongings and touched his shoulder. I had never in my life seen anybody cry like that before. Once he started, he was almost screaming as if he had one of his limbs ripped off at the socket. I didn't know what to do. After 15 minutes of hysterically crying, I finally got a chance to calm him down a little. My wife. She went to see a lady a while back. He trailed off. I stared at him intently, hanging on his every word, searching his face, trying to predict the outcome of the sentence he'd started. She saw a lady that told her fortune. She went with some friends. She thought it would be fun, I guess. My wife doesn't believe in things like that. He then looked up and stared right into my eyes with such fierceness I had to look away for a second. After her friends brought her home that day, they told me she'd gotten sick when they were out to lunch. How she had vomited all over herself like she drank a whole bottle of liquor. She was fine and talking one minute, and the next she just opened her mouth and vomit poured out, no heaving or anything. He continued. They told me that when she was with the fortune teller, she was laughing and making fun of the situation, being verbally abusive and calling the fortune teller a fraud, saying how she was ripping people off and how she should be reported to the authorities. Tears began to well up in his eyes again. Her friends said the fortune teller laughed and they all thought she was just being a good sport about it. She even invited my wife for a private reading just for fun and handed her her business card. Neil sat in complete silence at this point and stared at the floor. He traced the patterns of the carpet with the toe of his shoe. After what felt like minutes, he continued. After her friends called me at work and told me that Jennifer had been sick, I came home right away because if you knew Jennifer, you would know she's never sick. I don't think in the whole 15 years that we've been married I've ever seen her vomit, ever. When I came home, I found her in the bathtub soaking, sitting silently, just staring straight ahead. I asked her if she was okay several times, but she just stared ahead, not moving, not saying a word, so I thought that she just wanted to be left alone. He looked at me again, this time with a look of confusion mixed with concern. When I went to put her clothes in the washer, I found a card in her pocket. On the card it said, "The devil hears the songs of rotten souls," then a series of symbols. Neil stood up and grabbed my shoulder with such force that it caught me, and it made me yell in pain. I was starting to get scared and think that he was going to hurt me. The way that he stared into my eyes with this crazy, far-off expression, I was concerned for my safety at that point because, we were there alone. But before I could object, he blurted out, "I think my wife is possessed by the devil." And he fell to his knees and just sobbed. I stood there for a moment, stunned. My first thought was, what? And clearly, someone was playing a goddamn joke on me because what the hell? Who says some shit like that? And it be true. The devil isn't real, just as God isn't real. It's a creation of man, a fictional character in a book, for Pete's sake. Of course, I didn't tell him this. I didn't want to upset him any further. I bent down and picked him up off the floor. "What do you want me to do, Neil? Just tell me, and I'll help you." He looked at me, tears running down his face in tiny little rivers. "Come see, please. Come see her and tell me that I'm imagining it. Tell me that she's just crazy." I gathered my things and he and I walked to the parking garage to his car and drove to his house, silently.